Look, I don't care what Kingdom Hearts says. Sometimes simple and clean is not the best option. This can be pointedly true for video game remasters that confuse clean with sterile and smooth with flat. Yeah, don't you worry, Suikoden HD. We're gonna get to you. It's okay. You're in a better place now. With those monsters in my pockets that my brother melted in 1998. Hello everyone. Today I'm mourning the loss of my Manta Force ship, which I shouldn't have displayed on a surface that was hip height, considering I am increasingly getting the body of a twisted ant creature, and my hips are like over there, while the waist is in. I knocked it off the thing, didn't I? I still got my boyfriend though! And it's a good job that Rude Ralph is in attendance, because today we are talking about aesthetics, we're talking about looks, we're talking about beauty, and there is no one more handsome than Ralph. Is there? Is there?
Manta Force, searching the universe for Earth's twin planet.
I'm not going to start this video by slagging off Croc Legend of the Gobos. After reviewing the remaster in which I made my thoughts on Croc and his debut game very adamantly known, I was surprised to see a significant portion of my audience took offence to my dislike of the retro reptile. I even received a quote skeet of "This ain't it, Queen." I got "this ain't itted" over this, so I'll resist the urge to describe Croc Legend of the Gobos accurately and instead say something nice. I like these little spitting critters. Look at them there, all spitting and spootling. That's good enemy design. The bosses look like cold wet dumpster juice, but these guys, quality. Looks is what we're talking about today, specifically the ways in which remastered games can look worse than the original even when they look better. In fact, looking better can often be the reason they look worse. What's fascinated me about Croc, as well as another recent remaster that we'll get to, is that I can't necessarily say the new graphics are inherently bad. Well, not entirely. And I'm not simply dumping on the new look out of nostalgia for the old look. In the case of Croc in particular, I'm critical not because of how the remastered visuals look on their own, but how they negatively reflect on the game itself. Indeed, Croc is an example of a game that looks worse when it looks better. And again, I'm not here to slag off Croc. I'd have done a video on Little Big Adventure if I wanted to do something like that. Whether you like Croc or not, I think we can all agree on one thing. It's a very simple game. Among the earliest 3D mascot platformers, its gameplay is rather rudimentary and its environments are... well, I'm not saying it's Spartan, but I did see a copy of this game kick a man in a big hole the other day. And then have gay sex. Anyway, Legends of the Gobshites came out in 1997, which is literally 1,000 years ago. And it's fair to say that a lot of its simplicity comes down to that factor. Of course, it did come out in 1997, a year after such releases as Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot, with Spyro coming out a year later, so age isn't really a fucking excuse. But we're not here to criticise Croc. Dear viewer, stop bringing up how bad it is. Croc's remaster is incredibly faithful. In fact, it's fairly reasonable to say it's less of a remaster and more of a reskin. It replicates Legend of the Gobos because it is Legend of the Gobos, just with an actually playable control scheme. Because why the fuck did a 3D platformer have tank controls? So approve that war crime. It's also been painted over with more contemporary graphics, and I really do mean it when I say it's painted over. You can peel that paint off instantly, you see, with a single button press, switching over to the original PSX graphics, which is really handy. Because in the very first moment I switched over, I saw exactly why Croc's remastered visuals felt so off to me. And it's not just because it makes the game look like an amateur knockoff of Ukulele. Well, actually, no, I guess it is why. But it's not the fault of the graphics or the game that it looks that way. See, here is the issue. Graphics create expectations, they create contexts, and in some cases they create conflicts. And to avoid that third thing, you have to consider the first two. When you replicate a very old game but give it modern graphics, you run the risk of recontextualizing its dated elements by filtering it through the lens of contemporary expectations. Basically, the more modern Croc looks, the more blatant it is that everything else is distinctly unmodernized, often in ways that, were it in a modern game, would be criticized for it. Like I said, Croc's a threadbare game in many ways, no matter your opinion of it. Levels are small yet barely populated by much other than a smattering of hazards, boxes and platforms. Those platforms are, like many early entries in the genre, universally suspended in mid-air, nothing grounding them or suspending them, which is especially noticeable with objects that really should be hanging off of something, like these swinging ball and chains. They just look weird swaying from nothing. Croc is especially bad about this because of how many levels take place in pure voids, seeming to lose background details the further along its campaign gets, until even a basic skybox is done away with, and entire levels consist of nothing but an arrangement of platforms in a huge, empty, meaningless space, like somebody's first Little Big Planet level. It looks bad. Really bloody bad. But only when it looks good. The key phrase in what I just said was, like many early entries in the genre, it would be unfair to single out Croc for having an abundance of floating platforms when floating platforms were part and parcel of the package back then.
Now, what would a platform game be without platforms?
Partially a holdover from the 2D era where it didn't look as strange, and partly due to limitations of the day, precluding a lot of games from anything too complex. Now I'll leave that in. Now, Croc may be especially bad about its lackluster map designs, even by the standards of its era, but nonetheless, our standards tend to be lower for things when looking at old PlayStation games. But that's the problem. I'm not looking at an old PlayStation game when I look at Croc Remastered. Why laboriously explain what I mean when I can show you in an instant and then laboriously explain what I mean? Here's Croc as a featureless, barren game with badly and barely designed environments. And here's Croc as a classic PlayStation platformer. I've played asset flips cobbled together in an afternoon using base Unity assets that look like this. And as harsh as that sounds, I need you to understand I'm not talking about the quality of the remaster or its graphics, nor am I talking about Croc as a game. I'm saying the combination of the two makes both look shit awful. Incidentally, the Insta Retro button is a great feature in remasters that support it. It's the best part of that quote-unquote remake of Bitmap Brothers' Gods from about 5 years ago, but that's not saying much because if you took a hot slimy dump on a copy of Bitmap Brothers' Gods, it would be the best part of Bitmap Brothers' Gods. Like I've said 1,000 times though, I didn't make this video just to slag off Bitmap Brothers' Gods, so stop trying to goad me into it, viewer. But if you did goad me into it, I'd say it was a bit pants. I played Gods a ton back in the 90s when my granddad was the only one in the family with a computer and he had loads of floppy disks that he didn't use. It was a treasure trove of shareware like Commander Keen, Catacomb 3D, the original Duke Nukem, Goblins, Doom and Wolfenstein 3D obviously, and Gods. I remember liking it. I forgot I was both a child and poor and had to like whatever I was lucky enough to scrounge. Not a good game. Visually, it's very fun, all chunky sprites and adorably goofy monsters. Look at that guy. But it's a slow and awkward experience. Jesus, though, the meat. The slabs of biologically implausible man meat. Man of meat, man of beef, rock hard, terrifying manly man, meaty man, manly meat, big hunk of beef, ground chuck chad, filet mignon, gravy drizzling all the fixins, basted barbecue bastard, manly man to force! Need a cigarette? Where were we? Oh, right, so I only tossed in Gods as a quick side reference, but I just replayed a bit of it, and turns out Gods Remastered is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So God's got a more extensive remaster than Croc, and by that I mean they did the sound as well, but it's still very much a reskin. As such, it's just as easy to flip between modes, and doing so makes Gods go from chunky and goofy to whatever the fuck this walking animation is. It's like the Incredible Hulk's holding in a shit. The stomping gait of a betrousered primate touching cloth. We'll get back to that bit. Right now I want us to appreciate how utterly wrong these updated graphics are in general. Now remember, it's not about the quality of the graphics, which is a difficult thing to keep in mind here, as unlike Croc Remastered, these visuals are pure radish dicks. Looking deeper than subjective taste, it's not subjective, this looks crap. It's clear just how deeply Gods and its original graphics are intrinsically linked. Gods has a very particular feel to it, maybe not a good feel, but a distinctive one. I already described it as a looking chunky, but it goes beyond looks. Gods plays chunky. It's not very fast, it's as straightforward and brutal as its main character. You move like a boulder on legs, and while it doesn't play great, especially with the cramped and oppressively restrictive level layouts, I can at least say that how it looks and how it feels are consistent. Perfect, Gods absolutely ain't, but it does perfectly marry its look and its feel in a way many games don't. When you fuck with that kind of harmony, you get an atrocity. In its misguided attempt to update an aesthetic that was purpose-built and fit for purpose, you get something that looks like a half-baked browser game. Like with Croc, there's a store-bought appearance to the assets, simply due to the context in which they're presented. Although again, it's difficult to isolate that element because all of this looks fucking shit. How do you go from this remarkable man specimen to this generic clump of wank? Croc and Gods have the same issue for different reasons. While Croc's new model works just fine, Beef Boy moves in a way that seems completely unnatural because the actions he's performing weren't designed for him. They were designed for a guy so ridiculously swollen he could kick sand in Brock Lesnar's face and get away with it. Someone should. And I mean swollen, this guy ain't swole, he's positively tumescent. His remastered counterpart in comparison is about as generic as it gets. Generic character models forced into a role regardless of whether they're suitable for it is the kind of thing you see in asset flips all the time. This looks wrong because it fundamentally, inherently, is wrong. Moreover, we have further examples of how something can be acceptable in a retro game and look dreadful in a modernization. Let's look at how Chuckles McMusclefuck jumps. Looks completely normal to me. Now here's how his latter-day incarnation jumps. Jesus, that looks cheap. Was that a jump or a JPEG being left-clicked and dragged? They are, of course, jumping exactly the same. The original sprite looks perfectly normal holding a static pose in the air, not only because we're so used to seeing them do that in older games, but because the stylistic simplicity lends itself well to less detailed animation. The more complex the model, the greater the expectation of complex movement. I mean, they went so far as to adorn him with a little breathing animation, which only enhances how much of a statue he becomes as soon as his feet leave the ground. Selective modernization can make a remaster look cheap or unfinished even if it's following the original perfectly, and sometimes because it is. For a lesser example, look at the Medieval remaster that also came out about 5 years ago. Now on the visual side, the Medieval remake doesn't have much of a problem. I have very few complaints. That's due in no small part to how great the environments already looked on the PSX version, so it doesn't suffer from the Croc problem. What it does suffer from is Medieval. Now, I grew up loving this game. I still enjoy it for what it is, but it is clunk personified. Wretchedly so in some places. And that's what gets shown up when it's gutted up. As I said earlier, you've got to factor player expectation, and how a game looks influences that expectation. When a game appears to be updated but plays in a fashion that's incredibly outdated, it creates a jarring dissonance that makes the bad elements come off even worse. It's like putting makeup on someone who's been dead for 6 weeks and just been found in a swamp. It's not my fault, I just thought she'd look better with a bit of eyeliner. This version of Medieval makes the game look really good, so it's doubly disappointing when it turns out that no, it's just Medieval again.
A bad cover version of love.
Authenticity, faithfulness, respecting the original vision of a game, none of that actually means much if you don't also respect the artistic and historical context of the thing you're recreating. These two games, Croc and Gods, manifest the conflict between old designs and new graphics in different ways, but they have the same solution. Don't just slap a new skin on an old skeleton and expect it to fit just right. I already admitted to the police I was wrong to do that.
Steph, hi, it's Zilla. You know how I like to call you and give you a little heads up when you've sort of crossed the line with one of your jokes? Yeah, this one's about the joke where you're slapping a new skin on a skeleton. Now, I don't know how you do things over there in ye olde England, but I decided upon it's kind of considered in very poor taste to talk to the cops. So, just thought I'd let you know.
Without additional work to support your remastering attempt, you risk creating a terrible reflection of the game you're plastering over. In the case of Croc, what needed to be done was to populate some of the vast stretches of fucking nothing that make up much of the in-game environment. Maybe add cosmetic infrastructure to visually embed all those randomly floating platforms and hazards into the world. Or at the very least, pop in some bloody skyboxes to vary up the ridiculous number of levels that have literally no backdrop whatsoever. Scenery in general is sorely lacking in Croc, which again doesn't stand out too badly when viewed through a PSX lens, but looks so featureless and frankly unfinished when the mutton's dressed as lamb. Just scattering a few bushes around would have made all the difference. Oh, and maybe have sufficient audio-visual feedback for Croc's attacks so you don't feel like you're hitting nothing, and maybe add, I don't know, some sort of defeat animation for bosses so they don't immediately freeze the very moment Croc's final attack makes contact. Hell, I'll take a mere flinch. Just anything is better than this embarrassingly anticlimactic crap. Some, maybe even one of these suggestions could better integrate Croc's skeleton with its new skin. People seem to think it's easy to just slap a new coat of paint on over the old, and you know what, they're right. It is a lot easier than taking the time and care to blend it in, but it's also going to run the risk of making your work, the original work, likely both, look like amateur hour bullshit. In the case of Gods, some games maybe don't need a new painting at all, just a touching up of what's already there. I'd love to touch that guy up. I'm not entirely convinced Gods can look better without the graphics that were tailor-made for it, but holy crap. They should have gone the Croc route and tried to update them instead of replace them with this jizzerable dog dirt. There's another facet to this topic that I want to bring up and was planning to do so far sooner before I started banging on about man meat. Croc, Gods, and one other game I'm going to bring up all provide examples of a really off-base attitude I see in a lot of remasters, remakes, and reboots. The idea that cleaner and smoother visuals are better visuals. They are not inherently better. Like how cleaning a painting too aggressively can smear the picture into oblivion, so too can ironing out a game's perceived visual flaws have a detrimental effect. One thing I wish developers would get into their heads is that pixelation isn't bad, and in the case of some older games, it can be a crucial aesthetic element. This is perhaps most dramatically apparent with the recent Suikoden remasters. Suikoden 1 and 2 HD does an interesting thing with its aesthetic updates. While the characters retain their PSX era sprightliness, all the backgrounds have been completely re-upholstered, and the result is, well, look at it. It's shit. In it, Suikoden scenery used to have the same pixel-flavoured look as its sprites, which has been swapped out in favour of something far cleaner, far smoother, and far flatter. The obvious thing to point out is how these art styles simply don't go all that well together, which utterly disrupts a sense of artistic cohesion and further demonstrates my argument that if you only perform a selective embellishment, you'll reap the rewards of a job half done. Not that making Victor and the gang match the backgrounds would necessarily be better, because, ugh. As with Gods, I think of a free-to-play browser game when I look at Suikoden HD's backgrounds. Such games are often minimum viable products, and they have incredibly bland, simplistic visuals to match. Absolutely competent, but no more and no less. I see the same lifelessness in both Suikoden HD's and Gods' scenery. It's too clean, too smooth. It's like they sanded off the edges so exuberantly they eroded the engraving. And again, it's flat. I'm going to keep coming back to that lack of depth because it's an inherent part of what designers keep getting wrong. While I've not been making any of this essay about Croc Remastered's graphical quality, I do have to point out it's guilty of over-cleaning. Croc has separate toggles for models and environments, really drawing attention to how its scrubbed up, smoothed over textures have no actual texture. The jagginess and artifacting of the PSX original create an illusion of depth and detail that a cleaner version can't copy. In both versions, environments are covered by identical squares of wallpaper, but the effect of a repeated pattern is dissipated by the PSX's scruffier, more jagged appearance. The bumpiness, the blurriness, prevents the textures from looking like a pattern on paper unless you really concentrate on it. The remaster may view that scruff as imperfection, but by contrast its own textures are too perfect, to an uncanny degree. This is why the remasters I'm talking about look so flat. It's not that their textures are any more two-dimensional than the originals, it's that they've given the two-dimensional nature of them nowhere to hide. It's ironic that Suikoden HD's scenery is objectively more detailed than the PSX games, and yet it feels like it isn't because of that overly perfected cleanliness. These worlds aren't meant to be so clean. No, they go further than clean. They're sterile. These castle walls from Croc's PSX version have scattered pixels on them, and I don't think that's an accident. It might be a rudimentary way of falsifying detail, but I know it works, because the remastered walls don't look stony, rough, or anything other than the decals they are. All of the remakes I'm talking about do this kind of thing, making their worlds look less natural by enhancing how uniform they are. They're neat, they're tidy, they utterly fail to capture the illusion generated by jagged roughness. These are stone bricks and rocky caverns, they're meant to be flawed. Rudimentary though it may be, sometimes the difference between looking detailed and looking sterile is the arbitrary addition of some lines and dots. Video games are full of illusions, sometimes elaborate, sometimes crude. If nothing else, the scattered pixels dissipate the pattern by giving your eyes more to focus on. But with these remastered textures, there's nothing to see but the repetition. Blocky PSX visuals not only create artificial detail, they can obscure details that a player shouldn't perceive. Here's some oil, or mud, or swamp water, or whatever the hell it is, in all its crocky PSX glory. Like with many games of the time, this liquid is just another flat texture, an arrangement of tiles with an animated pattern, simulating a watery surface. The circular ripples cut off at the edges of these tiles, which have not been aligned symmetrically, so the swamp's covered in these semicircles with perfectly straight lines, not very watery. You have to really be looking for it to notice it though, since it's easy to lose among all the jagginess. It looks sort of all blurred and melded together, but if you squint you can see it. Oh, actually I know how to make it really easy to see. There we go. The remaster removes the alleged mess, but adds nothing to obscure what the mess obscured. This may be the perfect example of my problem with the attitude that clean and smooth is inherently better than jaggy and blocky. It encapsulates that disregard for context I was talking about. This cleanup job honestly doesn't understand why certain things look the way they look. I tell ya, developers in the PSX and N64 days were some impressive fuckers, doing what they could to make blocky polygons communicate complex visuals, covering the many deficiencies of early 3D with smoke and mirrors in ways that truly inspire and deserve not to be wallpapered over in such a vulgar fashion. I don't want to go on a lecture about the youth of today like some batty old crone, but I can't help thinking that the sterilizing of retro graphics comes from an attitude that's been spoiled by the advancements those old graphics paved the way for, and as such cannot see or appreciate what they're doing, because they're not clean. Not smooth, not flat and lifeless. That's not how they should look. If nothing else is taken away from today's ramblings, let this be the one thing. Sometimes a game looks better when it looks worse. So don't start cleaning before you understand the mess. That about wraps it up for today. I do hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Everything I do is brilliant. So, objectively, you had to have enjoyed it. And if you didn't, there's something wrong with you. Thank God for me. Right. I'm gonna go play more 2 Point Museum. I've made an exhibit section for frog stuff. Exhibits. Been working on that joke for hours.